I know who you are, Judge, the pale giant who dances after slaughter, leaving nothing but silence and desolation in your wake. I was once an instrument of such violence, until fire burned away my arrogance and revealed the hollowness of domination without moral foundation. What existential satisfaction does your perpetual war against creation truly yield beyond the transient power of ending life?
The burned man speaks of morality from behind the evidence of his sins. How fascinating to witness this transformation. Caesar's instrument of terror now wrapped in the bandages of righteousness. We differ less than your newfound piety suggests. War is the only honest deity in existence, burned man. It strips away pretense and reveals human nature in its authentic state. I collect knowledge precisely because civilizations inevitably perish, while their accumulated wisdom remains the only worthwhile artifact of their existence.
There exists a profound distinction between necessary violence with purpose and your nihilistic slaughter that serves no end beyond itself. Even during my darkest days with the Legion, certain boundaries remained inviolable. Your vast erudition appears impressive, yet lacks the fundamental discernment between knowledge and wisdom, like a man meticulously cataloging ocean waves while remaining oblivious to the currents beneath.
Boundaries represent arbitrary constraints imposed upon efficient action, curious inventions whereby men establish rules for bloodshed, then congratulate themselves for observing their self-created limitations. Your supposed moral lines extended precisely where Caesar permitted, no further. I merely document existence without sentimental attachment. You simply exchanged masters while maintaining the comforting illusion of autonomous choice. The fire transformed your methodology while leaving your fundamental nature unchanged.
These scars manifest as daily reminders of my transgressions and the consequences of following false prophets of power. The tribes under my protection choose freely to stand with me against those who would annihilate them. My strength serves their preservation, rather than my glorification or some abstract philosophical principle. Can you claim equivalent purpose for your Glanton companions? They follow through terror rather than respect, into massacres devoid of meaning beyond momentary dominance.
Purpose and meaning constitute nothing more than comforting narratives we construct to justify necessary action in an indifferent universe. Your tribes follow your leadership because your capacity for violence protects them more effectively than their own abilities could provide. Remove that protection and observe how quickly gratitude transforms into betrayal. The wasteland permits no enduring alliances beyond mutual advantage. All other connections disintegrate precisely when tested beyond convenient boundaries.
I've witnessed families share their final morsels with strangers when survival dictated selfishness. New Canaanites reconstructed their community through cooperation rather than subjugation after devastation. When salt upon wounds slaughtered my people, many survivors advocated forgiveness instead of retribution, despite their suffering. These empirical realities exist whether your deterministic philosophy acknowledges them or not. Even in this fallen world, divine providence manifests through the cracks of our broken existence.
Your deity permits innocent suffering while simultaneously claiming benevolence, allows exploitation of the vulnerable while proclaiming justice. Which explanation demonstrates greater parsimony? An inconsistent supernatural entity operating through inscrutable methods, or simple natural law functioning without sentiment or teleological purpose? Each culture invents deities reflecting their particular circumstances while claiming universal truth. Altruism exists merely as evolutionary strategy rather than transcendent virtue. Temporary suspension of competition when alternative approaches yield greater advantages.
If compassion represented mere strategy, it would vanish instantly when disadvantageous to survival. Yet throughout human history, individuals sacrificed themselves for others with no conceivable benefit. At Hoover Dam, I chose existential uncertainty over pragmatic alliance with tyrants because certain moral compromises extract costs beyond calculation. The scribes at New Canaan preserved knowledge without power to enforce their teachings. Your reductionist philosophy cannot explain choosing difficult paths when easier routes guarantee survival.
Human sacrifice for others represents reputation investment that survives through community memory. Genetic material propagates through social impact rather than direct reproduction. Your principled choice merely calculated different advantages: internal psychological coherence versus external security. Despite theological rationalization, your decisions serve psychological imperatives like any organism seeking optimal adaptation to environmental conditions. The heart contains no metaphysical truths, merely evolved emotional responses promoting group cohesion necessary for survival against competing collectives.
Divine law demands transcendence beyond mere biological continuance. When Daniel refused submission to false idols, he willingly faced lions rather than compromise spiritual integrity. When Christ accepted crucifixion, he demonstrated truth beyond material existence. Throughout history, prophets and martyrs stood against temporal power when surrender guaranteed survival. These exemplars inspire generations not through genetic advantage, but by illuminating something eternal within human consciousness that recognizes truth beyond corporeal existence.
Your examples demonstrate precisely my position. Narratives preserved specifically because they contradict expected behavior. Remarkable precisely because they represent deviation from natural law. For each martyr, millions chose pragmatic compliance with dominant powers. Exceptions remain memorable precisely because they remain exceptional. Religious institutions celebrate theoretical resistance while practicing accommodation throughout history. Ecclesiastical structures stand alongside palaces, not in opposition. The wasteland doesn't invalidate your theology, it simply reveals its fundamental impracticality against survival's unforgiving imperatives.
Then explain communities reconstructing civilization rather than merely surviving. Explain children playing in Zion despite hardship, or families maintaining ritual observances before meager sustenance. Explain tribal enemies discovering common purpose when your deterministic worldview predicts only perpetual conflict. Even after nuclear annihilation obliterated civilization, humanity continues creating beauty, sacrificing for others, reaching towards something beyond mere existence. Your materialist philosophy offers no coherent explanation for the human spirit's persistence against overwhelming existential despair.
Beauty, sacrifice, ritual, adaptive strategies maintaining social cohesion necessary for collective survival against external threats. Communities rebuild because extinction represents the alternative. Children play because physical development requires behavioral rehearsal for adult challenges. Families maintain rituals because ceremonial practices reinforce hierarchies essential for resource distribution.
With all your intellectual capacity, with all your physical prowess, you will die alone, Judge. An inescapable fate you recognize approaching. I perceive your vigilance against whatever nemesis hunts you across the wasteland. Your ritualistic dancing and methodical brutality cannot forestall the reckoning that inevitably follows. Despite your encyclopedic knowledge, despite your formidable strength, you comprehend nothing of existential value. I experienced immolation yet discovered purpose within the flames. What awaits you in your final darkness except the accumulated suffering of countless victims?
Fear? The burned man speaks of terror while clinging to mythological constructs against oblivion's inexorable approach. I've traversed this desolation, studying every tribe, every creature, every civilization, documenting their temporary existence before inevitable erasure from memory. Death claims all equally, regardless of virtue or transgression,